The helicopter blades chopped through the thin mountain air as Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen checked his gear one final time. The MH-60 Black Hawk carried 8 Navy SEALs toward what intelligence called a routine extraction mission in the rugged mountains of Afghanistan. Marcus had completed over 40 similar operations, but something felt different about this one. 2 minutes out, the pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Marcus looked around at his team. These men had become his brothers over countless missions. There was Rodriguez, the explosives expert who could disarm a bomb while eating lunch. Thompson, their medic, had saved more lives than any hospital doctor. Williams, their communications specialist, could hack into enemy systems faster than most people could send a text message. The intelligence briefing had been simple enough. A high-value target, a Taliban commander responsible for multiple attacks on coalition forces, was holed up in a compound near the Pakistani border. Local assets had confirmed his location. The plan was straightforward: fast rope down, secure the target, and extract within 20 minutes. Marcus had served with SEAL Team 6 for 8 years. He had earned his reputation through precision, calm decision-making, and an almost supernatural ability to sense danger before it materialized. His teammates called him Spider Sense because he seemed to know when trouble was coming before anyone else. As they approached the landing zone, Marcus felt that familiar tingle at the base of his neck. The compound below looked exactly as briefed, but something was wrong. The shadows were too perfect. The silence too complete. In his experience, even abandoned compounds had signs of recent life: footprints, disturbed dust, something. "Hold position," Marcus spoke into his radio. "Something's not right down there." The pilot's voice came back immediately. "Negative, we're committed. Intelligence confirms target is present and accounted for." Marcus trusted his instincts, but he also trusted his chain of command. 8 years of successful missions had taught him when to push back and when to follow orders. This felt like a moment to trust the system that had kept him alive through dozens of operations. The helicopter hovered at 60 feet above the compound. Marcus positioned himself at the open door, rope in hand. The wind from the rotors kicked up a cloud of dust and debris. Through his night vision goggles, he could see the flat-roofed building that housed their target. Rodriguez moved into position behind him. "Ready when you are, Sarge." Marcus grabbed the fast rope and prepared to slide down. In 12 seconds, he would be on the ground, leading his team into what should have been a textbook operation. He had done this exact maneuver hundreds of times in training and dozens of times in combat. What he didn't know was that 300 yards away, a Taliban sniper had been watching the compound for 2 days. The intelligence about the high-value target was accurate, but it was also a trap. The Taliban commander was indeed in the building, but he was there as bait. The sniper, a former Afghan army marksman who had defected to the Taliban, had Marcus in his scope. His finger rested on the trigger of a stolen American M24 rifle. He had been ordered to wait until the Americans were committed to the operation before opening fire. Marcus swung out on the rope, beginning his descent. At 40 feet above ground, the sniper fired. The bullet didn't hit Marcus directly. Instead, it struck the fast rope just above his hands. The high-velocity round severed the rope cleanly, sending Marcus into an uncontrolled fall toward the compound's concrete courtyard. Time seemed to slow as Marcus fell through the darkness. His SEAL training kicked in immediately. He had practiced emergency falls during SEER training, but never from 40 feet onto concrete. His mind raced through his options in the 2 seconds he had before impact. He spread his body to increase air resistance and slow his fall slightly. He angled himself to avoid landing on his head or spine. Most importantly, he prepared his body to roll and distribute the impact across as much surface area as possible. Marcus hit the ground with tremendous force. The impact drove the air from his lungs and sent shooting pain through his left leg. He rolled instinctively, using momentum to prevent his bones from absorbing the full shock of the landing. Above him, he could hear Rodriguez shouting into his radio. "Rope severed. Marcus is down. We need immediate support." Marcus lay still for a moment, assessing his injuries.
His left leg was definitely broken.
He could feel blood running down his face from cuts caused by concrete fragments.
His left shoulder felt dislocated.
But he was alive, and, more importantly, he was still thinking clearly. The compound around him was eerily quiet.
Too quiet.
His night vision had been knocked loose in the fall, but even without it, he could sense movement in the shadows. The Taliban had used the helicopter's approach to mask their own positioning. Marcus was alone, injured, and surrounded. From somewhere in the building came the sound of voices speaking in Pashto. Marcus didn't speak the language fluently, but he understood enough to know they were discussing how to capture him alive.
A captured Navy SEAL would be a significant propaganda victory for the Taliban.
Marcus forced himself to move, despite the pain shooting through his leg. He had to find cover and assess his situation properly. His rifle had been secured to his body during the fall and was still functional. His sidearm was intact. He had 3 magazines for his rifle and 2 for his pistol. He crawled toward the nearest building, dragging his broken leg behind him. Every movement sent waves of agony through his body, but he had trained for this kind of situation. Pain was temporary. Capture or death was permanent.
Above him, the Black Hawk circled, trying to establish a safe landing zone.
But the sniper fire had revealed the trap. More Taliban fighters were emerging from hidden positions around the compound.
What had been planned as a 20-minute operation was turning into a prolonged firefight.
Marcus reached the cover of a low wall just as the first Taliban fighter rounded the corner of the main building. The fighter was young, maybe 19, carrying an AK-47 and wearing a confident expression. He clearly expected to find a helpless, injured American. Instead, he found Marcus Chen, a man trained to fight under impossible conditions. Despite his injuries, Marcus' aim was steady and his mind was clear. The fighter went down before he could raise his weapon. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the compound, alerting every Taliban fighter to Marcus' exact location.
He could hear voices calling out, coordinating their search. They knew he was injured and alone.
They probably thought it would be easy to surround and capture him. They were about to learn why Navy SEALs are considered the most elite fighting force in the world. Marcus checked his ammunition and prepared for the fight of his life.
He was injured, outnumbered, and trapped in enemy territory.
But he was still a SEAL, and SEALs don't surrender. In the distance, he could hear the sound of additional helicopters approaching. His team was coming for him. He just had to survive long enough for them to arrive. With his broken leg braced against the wall and his rifle ready, Marcus Chen prepared to show the Taliban what happens when you corner a wounded warrior who has no intention of giving up. The real battle was just beginning. Marcus pressed his back against the mud brick wall, feeling the rough texture through his tactical vest. His broken left leg throbbed with each heartbeat, but adrenaline was keeping the worst of the pain at bay. Through the darkness, he could hear the Taliban fighters moving into position around the compound.
They were taking their time, confident that an injured American couldn't escape their trap.
He activated his radio with a whispered transmission.
"Overwatch, this is Viper 6. I'm mobile but compromised.
Estimate 8 to 12 hostiles in the compound.
Requesting immediate close air support."
Rodriguez's voice came back through static. Viper 6, we're working on extract options.
Apache inbound, ETA 4 minutes. Can you hold position? 4 minutes might as well have been 4 hours.
Marcus could see muzzle flashes as Taliban fighters tested different angles of approach. They were being methodical, trying to flush him out without risking their own lives unnecessarily. Marcus had landed in what appeared to be the compound's main courtyard. The building where the high-value target was supposed to be housed stood about 30 meters away. Between him and that building were 2 smaller structures that provided both cover and concealment for the enemy fighters. A voice called out in accented English from somewhere near the main building.
"American soldier. You are injured and alone. Surrender now and you will be treated according to Islamic law."
Marcus almost smiled despite his situation.
Islamic law for captured enemy soldiers usually meant a quick death if they were lucky. More likely, it meant becoming a propaganda tool before being executed on camera. He had seen the videos. Every SEAL had. Instead of responding, Marcus used the voice's location to estimate enemy positions. The Taliban commander was smart enough to stay behind cover while talking, but the sound gave Marcus valuable information about their defensive setup. Two fighters appeared from behind the eastern building, moving in a coordinated advance. They were young but moved like experienced fighters, keeping low and using available cover effectively. Marcus let them get closer, waiting for the optimal moment to engage. When the first fighter was 15 meters away, Marcus opened fire. 3 controlled bursts dropped both men before they could return fire effectively. Their AK-47 rounds chipped concrete fragments from the wall above Marcus's head, but the Taliban fighters' accuracy suffered from adrenaline and poor training. The compound erupted in automatic weapons fire. Marcus could count at least 6 different muzzle flashes as the Taliban fighters revealed their positions by shooting at the spot where they thought he was hiding. Most of their rounds went high or wide, but a few came close enough to remind Marcus that he was badly outnumbered. He moved along the wall, ignoring the pain in his leg as he sought a better defensive position. 20 meters to his right, he could see what looked like a small storage shed with thick walls. If he could reach it, he would have better cover and multiple escape routes. The move would require crossing open ground while under fire from multiple directions. With a broken leg, it would be nearly impossible to move quickly enough to avoid being hit. But staying in his current position meant certain death or capture when the Taliban fighters inevitably flanked his position. Marcus prepared for the move by identifying the most dangerous enemy positions. The sniper who had cut his rope was still out there somewhere, probably repositioning for a clean shot. At least 3 fighters were advancing from the east, and he could hear movement from the north suggesting another flanking attempt. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his vest and calculated the throw carefully. The explosion wouldn't kill anyone from that range, but it would force the eastern group to keep their heads down long enough for him to move. Marcus pulled the pin and threw the grenade toward the eastern building. He counted to 3, then began his desperate crawl toward the storage shed. His broken leg dragged behind him, leaving a trail in the dust that would be easy for the enemy to follow. The grenade exploded just as automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions. Bullets whined past Marcus's head and kicked up dust clouds around his body. One round tugged at his sleeve, another struck the ground so close to his face that concrete fragments cut his cheek. He reached the storage shed just as the Taliban fighters emerged from cover to pursue him. From his new position, Marcus had a clear field of fire across most of the compound. More importantly, the building's thick walls would stop anything short of a rocket-propelled grenade. Through his earpiece, Marcus could hear the Apache helicopter pilot coordinating with his ground team. "Viper team, this is Guardian 2-7. I have eyes on multiple hostiles in the compound. Viper 6, I need you to mark your position with IR strobe." Marcus activated his infrared strobe light, invisible to the naked eye but clearly visible to the Apache's night vision systems. Within seconds, the helicopter pilot confirmed visual contact. "Viper 6, Guardian 2-7. I count 11 hostiles in your immediate area. Preparing to engage targets to your north and east. Keep your head down." The Apache's 30mm cannon opened fire with a distinctive grinding sound that Marcus had heard many times before. High explosive rounds tore through the northern building where several Taliban fighters had been positioning themselves for an assault on Marcus's position. The structure partially collapsed, sending up clouds of dust and debris. But the Taliban fighters were more experienced than Marcus had initially thought. Instead of panicking under the helicopter attack, they dispersed into smaller groups and took cover in positions that would be difficult for the Apache to target without risking Marcus's safety. The sniper fired again, this time targeting the Apache. Marcus could see the muzzle flash from a building about 200 meters outside the main compound. The bullet struck the helicopter's armor plating, causing sparks but no serious damage. Guardian 2-7 taking fire from sniper position 200 meters northwest of the compound, the pilot reported. Moving to engage. As the Apache turned to deal with the sniper, Marcus realized he was temporarily on his own again.
The Taliban fighters who had survived the helicopter attack were regrouping. He could hear them calling to each other in Pashto, coordinating a new assault plan.
Marcus checked his ammunition.
He had used nearly half of his rifle rounds and hadn't even seen the high-value target they had come to capture. For all he knew, the Taliban commander had already escaped during the confusion.
3 fighters emerged from the western building, moving in a professional bounding advance.
One would move while the other 2 provided covering fire, then they would switch roles. It was a textbook small unit tactic that showed these weren't just local farmers with rifles. Marcus engaged the advancing fighters with careful, aimed shots. His marksmanship training had emphasized precision over volume of fire. Every round had to count, especially when ammunition was limited and resupply was impossible. The first fighter went down with a clean shot to the chest. The second stumbled and fell when Marcus's bullet caught him in the leg, but he continued trying to advance by crawling forward with his rifle.
Marcus put a second round into the wounded fighter, ending the threat.
The third fighter, seeing his companions fall, retreated back to cover. But Marcus had noted his position carefully. When the fighter tried to move to a different location, Marcus was ready. The Taliban fighter made it 3 steps before Marcus's bullet found its mark. From somewhere in the main building came the sound of vehicles starting up. Marcus realized that while he had been fighting for his life in the courtyard, a high-value target was probably escaping through a back exit.
The entire mission was falling apart.
But Marcus's immediate concern was survival, not mission objectives. He could see more fighters moving into position, and his ammunition was running low. The Apache was still engaged with the sniper, and his ground team couldn't land while the compound was under fire. Marcus keyed his radio again.
Overwatch, Viper 6. I need immediate extract.
Ammunition running low, and I count at least 6 hostiles still active in the compound.
Rodriguez's voice came back immediately.
Viper 6, we're coming for you. Hold your position for 30 more seconds. 30 seconds felt like an eternity when surrounded by enemy fighters who wanted nothing more than to capture or kill him. Marcus prepared his last grenade, saving it for the moment when the Taliban fighters made their final assault. He wouldn't let them take him alive. The distinctive sound of rotor blades grew louder as a second Black Hawk approached the compound at high speed. Marcus could see the aircraft's outline against the star-filled sky, flying without navigation lights to avoid presenting an easy target for enemy fire. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard Rodriguez coordinating the rescue operation. Guardian team, this is Viper leader. We're coming in fast and low from the south. Viper 6, we'll need you to suppress enemy fire during our approach. Marcus gripped his rifle tighter, knowing this would be his most critical moment. His team was risking everything to extract him, flying into a hostile landing zone where Taliban fighters controlled multiple firing positions.
If he couldn't provide adequate covering fire, the rescue helicopter would become a target-rich environment for enemy fighters. 4 Taliban fighters emerged from concealment near the main building, clearly planning to engage the incoming helicopter with rocket-propelled grenades.
Marcus could see one fighter carrying an RPG launcher while the others provided security with their assault rifles. Despite the pain shooting through his broken leg, Marcus shifted to a better firing position. The storage shed's corner gave him a clear line of sight to the Taliban fighters, but it also exposed him to return fire from other positions around the compound. Marcus opened fire just as the lead Taliban fighter raised his RPG launcher toward the approaching helicopter. His first shot struck the launcher itself, causing it to explode in the fighter's hands. The blast killed the RPG operator instantly and wounded the 2 security fighters standing nearby. The 4th Taliban fighter turned his AK-47 toward Marcus's position, firing a long burst that chipped chunks of concrete from the building's corner. Marcus ducked behind cover as bullets whined overhead, then emerged to engage the remaining threat.
2 quick shots dropped the fighter before he could reload his weapon.
The Black Hawk flared hard, bleeding off airspeed as it approached the compound's landing zone. The pilot was performing what helicopter crews call a combat landing, coming in fast and steep to minimize exposure time to enemy fire. But the Taliban fighters had more surprises waiting. From a concealed position near the compound's eastern wall, a machine gun team opened fire on the helicopter. The heavy bullets struck the aircraft's armored fuselage, creating sparks and causing the Black Hawk to wobble slightly in its approach. Marcus could see the machine gun's muzzle flashes clearly. The two-man team had positioned themselves behind a low wall that provided excellent concealment while giving them a clear field of fire across the landing zone. If they weren't eliminated quickly, they would either destroy the helicopter or force it to abort the landing. With his rifle's limited ammunition, Marcus needed to make every shot count. The machine gun team was over 100 meters away, operating a crew-served weapon that could keep firing even if one operator was hit. Marcus would need to eliminate both fighters quickly and precisely. He steadied his rifle against the storage shed's corner, controlling his breathing despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. The machine gun's muzzle flashes provided perfect aiming points, but the fighters were partially concealed behind their defensive position. Marcus fired twice in rapid succession. His first shot caught the primary gunner in the head, dropping him instantly. The second shooter tried to take over the weapon, but Marcus's follow-up shot found its mark before the fighter could resume firing. The Black Hawk touched down in a cloud of dust and debris, its engines still running at full power. The crew chief was already at the open door, scanning for threats while Marcus's teammates prepared to sprint across the compound to his position. Thompson, the team medic, led the rescue group with Rodriguez and Williams providing security. All three SEALs moved with the fluid precision that comes from years of training and combat experience. They used available cover effectively, advancing in coordinated bounds while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. Marcus provided covering fire as his teammates crossed the open ground, engaging two Taliban fighters who tried to intercept the rescue team. His shots forced the enemy fighters to keep their heads down, allowing his teammates to reach his position safely. "About time you guys showed up," Marcus said through gritted teeth as Thompson began examining his injuries. Despite his attempt at humor, the pain was becoming harder to ignore now that help had arrived. Thompson worked quickly, injecting Marcus with a strong painkiller before applying a field splint to his broken leg. "We'll have you drinking beer and telling lies about this mission in 12 hours, the medic said, but Marcus could see concern in his eyes. Williams was monitoring radio traffic while Rodriguez maintained security. "Apache reports the sniper position has been neutralized," Williams said. "But we're picking up radio chatter suggesting enemy reinforcements are heading this way." Marcus knew they needed to move immediately. The Taliban operated in small, mobile groups that could appear quickly and disappear just as fast. If enemy reinforcements arrived before they could extract, the entire rescue team would be trapped in the compound. Thompson and Rodriguez helped Marcus to his feet, supporting his weight as they began moving toward the waiting helicopter. Each step sent waves of pain through his broken leg, but Marcus forced himself to keep moving. His teammates' lives depended on getting to the extraction point quickly. Halfway to the helicopter, automatic weapons fire erupted from the main building. The high-value target they had come to capture was still in the compound, and he was making a final attempt to prevent their escape. Marcus could see muzzle flashes from multiple windows as Taliban fighters poured fire toward the rescue team. Williams immediately returned fire while Rodriguez and Thompson continued helping Marcus toward the aircraft. The crew chief was also engaging targets from the helicopter's door, his machine gun laying down suppressive fire across the building's facade. A Taliban fighter emerged from behind the building, firing an RPG toward the Black Hawk. The rocket-propelled grenade streaked across the compound, missing the helicopter by less than 10 meters before exploding harmlessly against the compound's outer wall. Marcus pulled his sidearm and engaged the RPG operator despite being supported by his teammates. His shots were accurate even while moving, dropping the fighter before he could reload his weapon. The years of training under stress were paying off when it mattered most. They reached the helicopter just as enemy reinforcements began arriving outside the compound. Marcus could see vehicle lights approaching from the north, probably carrying additional Taliban fighters who would turn the rescue into a prolonged battle. Thompson and Rodriguez lifted Marcus into the Black Hawk while Williams continued providing security. The crew chief helped pull Marcus fully into the aircraft while the pilot increased engine power for immediate takeoff. As the helicopter lifted off, Marcus could see Taliban fighters running into the compound from multiple directions.
They had escaped with only minutes to spare. The high-value target was probably still in the building, but the mission had become secondary to getting Marcus and his team out alive. The Apache helicopter that had been providing close air support fell into formation alongside their Black Hawk, ready to engage any ground-to-air threats during their flight back to base. Marcus knew that his teammates had risked everything to rescue him, and he was grateful to be alive. But, as the compound disappeared into the darkness below, Marcus realized that this mission would change how he approached future operations. The intelligence had been accurate but incomplete. The Taliban had been more sophisticated than expected. Most importantly, he had learned that even the best training and preparation couldn't eliminate all risks in combat operations. Thompson was starting an intravenous line in Marcus's arm, preparing to give him stronger pain medication for the flight back to base. "You did good down there," the medic said quietly. "Held them off long enough for us to get you out." Marcus looked at his teammates, men who had flown into a hostile landing zone to rescue him without hesitation. That kind of loyalty and courage was what made the SEALs special. No matter how bad the situation became, they never left anyone behind. The medical evacuation helicopter touched down at Bugram Airfield 47 minutes after Marcus's rescue. The flight had been a blur of pain medication and concerned voices as Thompson worked to stabilize his injuries during the journey back to base. Marcus was immediately transferred to the base hospital, where a team of military surgeons was already prepared to treat his wounds. The broken leg required immediate surgery to insert metal pins and plates, while his dislocated shoulder needed to be reset properly. The cuts on his face from concrete fragments were cleaned and sutured, leaving scars that would remind him of the mission for the rest of his life. During the 3 days Marcus spent recovering in the hospital, intelligence analysts worked around the clock to understand what had gone wrong with the operation. The high-value target had indeed been in the compound, just as reported. But the Taliban had turned the situation into an elaborate trap, using their commander as bait to lure American Special Operations Forces into a kill zone. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the task force commander, visited Marcus on his second day in the hospital. She brought news about the mission's outcome and the intelligence failure that had nearly cost him his life. "The Taliban sniper who cut your rope was a former Afghan National Army marksman named Khalil Nazir," Colonel Mitchell explained, pulling up a chair beside Marcus's hospital bed. "He defected 6 months ago and has been responsible for at least 12 coalition casualties since then." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his bed, the pain medication making him feel drowsy but alert enough to understand the implications. "Did we get him?" "The Apache took out his position with a Hellfire missile about 10 minutes after your extraction," the colonel replied. "Analysis of the strike confirms he was eliminated along with 2 other fighters who were spotting for him." Colonel Mitchell went on to explain that the intelligence about the high-value target had been accurate but deliberately leaked by Taliban operatives. They had wanted coalition forces to attempt a capture operation, knowing that American rules of engagement would require soldiers to enter the compound rather than simply destroying it with airstrikes. "The Taliban commander we were trying to capture was killed during the firefight," she continued. "Williams put 2 rounds through his center mass when he tried to engage your rescue team with that RPG. So the mission objective was technically accomplished, even though we lost the opportunity to interrogate him." Marcus nodded slowly, processing the information. Military operations rarely went exactly as planned, but this mission had been compromised before it even began. The Taliban had demonstrated a level of tactical sophistication that intelligence analysts were still trying to fully understand. Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams visited Marcus later that afternoon, bringing news from their teammates and updates about upcoming missions. The 3 SEALs had already been assigned to a new operation targeting Taliban weapons caches in the same region. "You're not missing much," Rodriguez said with a grin. "Just the usual routine of getting shot at by people who don't appreciate our presence in their neighborhood." Thompson, ever the professional medic, examined Marcus's medical chart and spoke with his doctors about the recovery timeline. 8 weeks minimum before you're cleared for active duty, Thompson reported. "The leg needs time to heal properly, and they want to make sure there's no permanent nerve damage." Marcus had been dreading that news but wasn't surprised. The fall from 40 feet onto concrete should have killed him. The fact that he was alive with only a broken leg and some minor injuries was almost miraculous. Many soldiers who survived similar impacts ended up with spinal cord injuries or traumatic brain damage. Williams had brought a laptop computer so Marcus could file his after-action report while the details were still fresh in his memory. Writing the report required Marcus to relive every moment of the mission, from the initial approach to his eventual rescue. The process was therapeutic in some ways but also emotionally draining. As Marcus typed his account of the events, he found himself focusing on the split-second decisions that had kept him alive. The instinctive body positioning during his fall. The tactical movement between cover positions despite his broken leg. The ammunition conservation that had allowed him to hold off multiple attackers until help arrived. More than anything, Marcus realized how much his survival had depended on his teammates' willingness to risk their own lives for his rescue. The Black Hawk crew had flown into a hostile landing zone without hesitation. Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams had crossed open ground under enemy fire to reach his position. The Apache crew had engaged multiple threats while maintaining precise fire discipline to avoid hitting friendly forces. Dr. Patricia Gonzalez, the orthopedic surgeon who had operated on Marcus's leg, stopped by his room during evening rounds. She was a Navy commander who had treated dozens of wounded Special Operations soldiers during her deployment to Afghanistan. "Your recovery is progressing well," Dr. Gonzalez said while examining Marcus's surgical incisions. "The metal hardware we installed should provide full stability once the bone heals properly. You should regain complete mobility in your leg, though you might notice some stiffness during cold weather." Marcus asked about his timeline for returning to active duty with his SEAL team. Dr. Gonzalez explained that physical recovery was only part of the equation. Military psychologists would also need to evaluate his mental readiness to return to combat operations. "Surviving a traumatic event like this can affect people in different ways," she explained. "Some soldiers experience anxiety about helicopter operations or confined spaces. Others develop hypervigilance or sleep disturbances. The psychological evaluation is standard procedure to make sure you're ready for the demands of special operations." On his fourth day in the hospital, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Master Chief Frank Sullivan, the senior enlisted leader for SEAL Team 6, had flown in from Virginia Beach specifically to check on Marcus's condition and discuss his future with the team. Master Chief Sullivan was a legend within the special operations community. He had served with the SEALs for over 20 years, participating in classified missions around the world. His presence at Marcus's bedside sent a clear message that the team valued his contributions and wanted him to return when he was ready. "You showed good tactical thinking under impossible conditions," Master Chief Sullivan said during their private conversation. "Staying calm when you're injured and surrounded by hostiles is what separates professionals from amateurs. Your teammates told me you never stopped fighting, even when the situation looked hopeless." Marcus felt a surge of pride at the recognition from someone he respected so deeply. But he also understood that praise from his superiors came with expectations for future performance. The SEAL community was small and tight-knit. Reputations were built over years of consistent excellence under pressure. "I've been thinking about what went wrong with the intelligence," Marcus said. "How do we prevent this kind of setup in the future?" Master Chief Sullivan nodded approvingly at the question. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that will make you a better operator when you return to the team. Intelligence is always incomplete and sometimes deliberately misleading. Our job is to adapt and overcome when the situation changes." Over the following weeks, Marcus underwent intensive physical therapy to rebuild strength in his injured leg. The military physical therapists pushed him hard, knowing that SEAL operations required peak physical conditioning. Every day brought incremental improvements in his mobility and endurance. The psychological evaluation proved to be more challenging than the physical recovery. Military psychologists asked detailed questions about his thought processes during the mission, his emotional responses to stress, and his comfort level with returning to combat operations. Marcus answered honestly about his experience, acknowledging that the mission had been traumatic while maintaining confidence in his ability to perform effectively in future operations. The psychologists seemed satisfied with his mental resilience and recommended him for return to active duty once his physical recovery was complete.
10 weeks after the failed mission, Marcus rejoined his SEAL team for training exercises at their Virginia Beach headquarters. His leg had healed completely, though he would always carry small scars as reminders of that night in the Afghan mountains.
The first helicopter training flight was emotionally challenging.
As Marcus prepared to fast rope from the aircraft, he couldn't help remembering the moment when his rope had been severed by sniper fire. But his training and professionalism overcame the brief moment of anxiety, and he completed the exercise successfully. Rodriguez, Thompson, and Williams welcomed Marcus back with typical military humor, joking about his vacation in the hospital and questioning whether he had gone soft during his recovery. But Marcus could see the genuine relief in their eyes. They had their teammate back, and the bond forged during his rescue had made them even closer as a unit. 6 months later, Marcus received the Bronze Star Medal for his actions during the mission. The citation praised his courage under fire and his tactical expertise in holding off superior enemy forces while wounded and alone. More importantly to Marcus, his teammates were there to witness the ceremony. As Marcus looked back on the mission that had nearly cost him his life, he understood that it had also taught him valuable lessons about leadership, survival, and the importance of teamwork. The Taliban had set an elaborate trap, but they had underestimated the training, determination, and loyalty that defined America's elite special operations forces. The scars on his leg would fade with time, but Marcus would never forget the night when everything went wrong and his SEAL training kept him alive. It was a reminder that in the dangerous world of special operations, survival often depends on split-second decisions, years of preparation, and teammates who will never leave you behind.